and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a look at the top headlines. Ukrainian, US and Russian officials to hold security talks in UAE on Friday, the Kremlin confirmed following a meeting of top US negotiators with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. US President Donald Trump withdraws invite for Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney to join his newly constituted Board of Peace for Gaza. NATO Secretary Mark Rutte says he and US President Donald Trump had discussed in Davos how the transatlantic alliance should best defend the Arctic against Russia and China. Japan's lower house of parliament dissolves ahead of a snap election on February 8th. The announcement for snap election comes just 3 months after Sanae Takaichi became the nation's first woman prime minister. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te offers talks with Ukraine to crack down on sanctions busting after Ukraine President Zelensky name-checked the island as the source of illicit missile components. Australian police intensify search for gunman who allegedly killed 2 women and a man in a rural town in New South Wales. Two teenagers among 6 missing after a landslide hit a busy campground on New Zealand's North Island as rescuers work round the clock to locate survivors under the rubble. TikTok announces it established a majority American-owned joint venture to operate its US business, allowing the company to avoid a ban over its Chinese ownership. Alright, viewers, we now shift to news from Bangladesh, whose chief advisor, Professor Mohammad Yunus, has said the February 12 general election will set a benchmark for future polls, promising free, fair and transparent voting. Yunus made the remarks during a meeting with the newly appointed US Ambassador to Bangladesh, Brent Christensen, at the State Guest House, Jamuna, on Thursday. The discussion covered the upcoming election, new labor laws, ongoing Bangladesh-US trade talks, and the Rohingya crisis. He also praised US tariff reductions and humanitarian assistance to Rohingya refugees. Meanwhile, the country's main political parties, including the BNP, Jamaat-e-Islami and National Citizens Party, officially launched campaigns 3 weeks ahead of the polls with tight security and no reported violence. Retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi now joins me in this discussion. He's a defense analyst from New Delhi. General, thanks very much for joining me here at NewsX World. Firstly, what's your opinion of the polls that are upcoming in Bangladesh, and how prepared is the country really for fair elections?
Well, Kriti, first and foremost, it's a very positive sign that elections are taking place and all preparations are in place for the 12th February elections. But there are a number of caveats, whether these elections will be peaceful or fair because of a couple of reasons. First and foremost, the main political party of Bangladesh, that is the Awami League, has been barred from contesting the elections, and Awami League has a very high footprint in the Bangladesh politics. Second point is that this Jamaatis, their alliance of 10 parties, which also includes the newly formed National Citizen Party by the students, who are the main architects of the August, protest, which ousted Sheikh Hasina. Now these parties are enjoying a tacit patronage from Mohammad Yunus and his dispensation. So therefore, there is a very obvious sign of favoritism that are on the ground or that will impact the elections. The third point is the minorities, because most of the Hindus, they always supported Awami League, and Hindus form about 8% of the Bangladesh population, about 13 million of them, and they have been repeatedly targeted because of their affiliation or their political leaning. So all these things add up, and nonetheless is the law and order situation, because today virtually there is very little law and order symptoms or indications on the ground. And there have been repeated killings of especially of minorities, and this administration is not very effective on the ground. So with all these things put together, there's a big question mark whether the forthcoming elections on 12th of February would be fair, peaceful, or they'll be hijacked, which is quite possible because even the army or the military dispensation has certain amount of agenda in these elections. Preeti.
Okay. General Dwivedi, now should Jamaat come to power, which is most likely in the current situation, how do you see the minority community surviving in the country?
Kriti, that's a big concern because as the opinion polls indicate that Jamaatis and BNP, that is Bangladesh National Party, are almost running neck to neck. And therefore, there are high chances that Jamaatis will come into power. And Jamaatis are the Islamist organization. They have the Islamist ideology. And in 1971, the war which I fought in Bangladesh, the Jamaatis had actually supported the Pakistan regime. So therefore, there's a, I think, high degree of skepticism as to which side the Bangladesh will go. And if Jamaatis come to power, Bangladesh will willy-nilly become another Islamist state. It will lose its Bengali culture, its Bengali signature, and it will be more of a Islamist state. And that's what is the worry. And in that case, this future of the minorities, especially Hindus, is actually going to be in serious jeopardy because it will be the same situation that was in 1971 when the Pakistan army cracked down. Most of these people who came to India, about 10 million of them, mostly they were Hindus. So therefore, I see a very bleak future for the minorities in case Islamists come into power, which is most likely. Kriti.
All right. Do you think Yunus will be able to handle the pressure that's mounting on him, General, with the elections upcoming?
Well, Yunus is actually a appointee, and he is on the goodwill or the mercy of the armed forces because he has been appointed by them. He doesn't have very much his own clout. So therefore, once these, how the elections shape out, which party comes into power, and what role army chooses to play. On the face of it, army, that is the General Uzzaman, Warwick Uzzaman has said that army is actually neutral, but I don't think that is the case because they have an axe to grind and they would like to see a particular dispensation come to power after the elections. So I don't think Muhammad Yunus by himself wields much of clout. He will be played out by the forces which actually come into the power and most likely how the army handles this situation because, and one more important point is that kind of bonhomie that has developed between the Pakistan army and the Bangladesh armed forces. There have been number of visits, mutual visits, and they are also coming closer to some kind of a defense pact. And with overhead, the overlooming shadow of China, this makes a situation very complex and especially concerning for India.
Finally, General, would you say that Bangladesh is headed pre-1971 way? Because like you said, its Bengali culture is slowly diminishing and more Islamist elements are coming forth. What really is now the difference between internal culture of Pakistan and Bangladesh?
Well, Kriti, Mark Twain had said that history doesn't repeat its rhymes, so possibly history is rhyming to the pre-1971 situation where this was exactly the situation because at that time also, Pakistan dispensation or the Pakistan government under Yahya Khan and his army, they wanted Bangladesh to be actually, aligned or almost merged with the Pakistan or Punjabi Muslim culture. But then in 1971, the whole movement was to preserve the Bengali culture and not to get, an identity of Pakistan. Now, this is exactly what is playing out. Once the Jamaatis, in case they come to power, then willy-nilly it will be the East Pakistan because the way this situation is panning out, the way the army of Bangladesh and Pakistan are coming together, the way the whole architecture is emerging, it's quite likely that it will once again be erstwhile East Pakistan, and that will actually be a very sad state because the very fact Bangladesh was created, I think that will lose its sanctity, and that will not be in the larger good of the region or for Bangladesh people, because willy-nilly they'll become a mirror reflection of west of Pakistan. Kriti.
All right, General, thank you very much for your comments. I request you to stay on as we proceed. Now, viewers, China and the Philippines have launched joint rescue operations on Friday after reports of a distressed cargo ship near the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The vessel carrying 21 Philippine crew members had capsized. The Chinese military reported that 2 crew members had died while 17 were rescued. The incident occurred early Friday morning, and Chinese authorities dispatched aircraft and Coast Guard vessels for search and rescue operations. One person was receiving emergency medical treatment, and additional rescue forces were being organized. The Philippine Coast Guard also mobilized 2 vessels and 2 aircraft to assist with the operation. They confirmed that 10 of the 21 Filipino crew members were rescued by a passing China Coast Guard vessel. Scarborough Shoal remains a highly contested area in the South China Sea, a region often at the center of sovereignty and fishing rights disputes. Tension over the shoal have escalated, with China recently accusing the Philippines of airspace violations after a Philippine government aircraft was driven away by Chinese naval and air forces on Tuesday earlier this week. The South China Sea remains a flashpoint for territorial disputes, with China claiming nearly the entire area overlapping the exclusive economic zones of several Southeast Asian nations. General, I request you to join me back in the discussion here. Firstly, how do you see the fact that Chinese pressure in this presence in the Scarborough Shoal is clearly indicative of the fact that it is entering the exclusive economic zone that Philippines has long contested belongs to it?
Absolutely, Kriti, because China claims the complete South China Sea because it lays a historical claim, and it has drawn a line known as 9-dash line. And that 9-dash line overlaps with the exclusive economic zone waters of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam. So therefore, the waters of South China Sea have become very highly contested and a possible flashpoint. Second point is, in 2016, International Court of Justice had given a verdict in favor of Philippines that the Scarborough Shoal is in the Philippines exclusive economic zone, because the geographic distance will itself justify that, because Scarborough Shoal is just 200 kilometers from Philippines, that is the Luzon coast, and it is 800 kilometers from the Chinese Hainan island. So therefore, the Chinese have muscled their way through, and they did not accept the International Court of Justice. In fact, Chinese are very selective to accept such verdicts only when it suits them. Doesn't suit them, they just couldn't care. So therefore, Scarborough Shoal has become a very contested, highly contested waters, and now this rescue mission, actually Chinese are chipped in because this gives them good publicity. It gives them an image of a responsible nation, and they are rendering humanitarian aid. So all this actually is a photo op, but internally Chinese are very, in strength, and they have repeatedly thrown out the Philippines, either the Coast Guard or the Philippine naval ships. And this is just, I think, to win a goodwill in the larger public media ops, but otherwise the waters are very highly contested, Kriti.
Yeah. Do you think they're taking this high moral ground only to prove a point to the world and possibly to increase its chances over the contentious shoal?
Yeah, absolutely, Kriti, because there's all, as I said, is the optics, and Chinese media is adept at, I would say, grabbing such opportunities and playing out to the world that China is a peace-loving nation, and it's a responsible nation, and in this case, when there was a disaster because the cargo ship which actually capsized was the Philippine cargo ship which had 21 crew and they have rescued about 13 of them. So there's all a photo op and possibly try to get the maximum mileage out of a disaster by projecting China as a humanitarian, responsible, peace-loving nation. But at the heart of it, these waters are very highly contested and Chinese have muscled their way through. They have almost gobbled 80% of South China Sea and very little is left now, but the dispute is still on and Chinese are actually pressing, gobbling inch by inch, ultimately to grab the whole South China Sea. Kriti.
Right. Finally, General, do note here that while US is publicly attacking its allies, for example, its Western European allies, France, Germany, UK have spoken against Trump, as have countries in Latin America. China is trying to help its non-allies, particularly as seen in this operation. Would you say that China is actually trying to capitalize on the void that the US is leaving?
Well, absolutely, because Chinese always have a policy, Kriti, that is the play one barbarian against the other, because that's how they hedge against US by either sometime coming closer to Japan or sometime developing good relations with South Korea, all play one against the other. And that is the Chinese policy and they are masters at it. So right now when the Trump administration or Trump himself is actually disrupting the well-known historical alliances like NATO or the transatlantic partnerships. Now Chinese are waiting for such opportunities and Chinese and Putin, President Putin must be having a great laugh and celebrating because this turmoil or this kind of disruption that is being caused by President Trump actually is in favor of both China and Russia.
Right.
So they will like to hedge on this, they like to exploit this situation and ensure that those countries in this scenario who are not with US, they patronize them and they lend them support so that they can get maximum political mileage out of this turmoil or out of this disruption that is on at present. Kriti.
All right, General, thanks very much then for joining me in this discussion. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And moving ahead, viewers, we're now going to cover news from the United States, where Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has sharply criticized the federal surge of immigration enforcement agents, or ICE, in his city, calling their actions racial profiling and political retaliation, not legitimate efforts to improve public safety. Frey said recent operations by ICE and Border Patrol have tragically terrorized people in Minneapolis, where protests have erupted in response to aggressive federal tactics. Listen in.
Clearly, what we are seeing on our streets right now is discriminating only on the basis of race and largely indiscriminate thereafter. So yeah, in Minneapolis, we want to solve crime. We want to arrest murderers. Let's do it. Let's work together to drive down crime. Again, this is not that. We have had relationships with a number of federal administrations to successfully drive down crime. What we are seeing is this is more about political retaliation. This is more about tragically terrorizing people than it is about safety, than it is even about immigration. Peace is not spraying irritants and chemicals at peaceful protesters. It's not detaining a 5-year-old. It's not dragging a pregnant woman through the streets. You achieve peace by working directly with communities. You lower crime by strategically going after people that have committed it. The vice president said he would love to be able to send some of these agents home. You know, there's no disagreement there. We've been encouraging that for weeks.
Frey's comments come as Vice President J.D. Vance visited Minneapolis to defend the presence of thousands of federal agents, saying local leaders and far-left agitators are to blame for disorder. The dispute over enforcement in Minneapolis also includes controversy over the detention of a 5-year-old boy and his father during an ICE operation, which has drawn national criticism. All right, joining me now in this discussion is senior journalist from New Delhi, Gautam Mukherjee. Mr. Mukherjee, thanks very much for joining me. Now, of course, the allegations against ICE are of racial discrimination, racial profiling, political maneuvering, political retaliation, which the mayor himself is raising. How do you think these concerns will be addressed, if at all, ahead of the midterms that's also upcoming in the US?
I think there are an enormous amount of Sudanese people, many of them illegal immigrants, who are in Minneapolis, aided and abetted by certain politicians. That the central government is cracking down on this is altogether necessary. Sudan is a disturbed area. These people are radicalized Muslims, and to color this in terms of race and persecution of innocent people is stretching the truth quite a lot.
All right. Well, the person who was taken in was of Ecuadorian origin, whose 5-year-old was taken, and of course, former Vice President Kamala Harris has also called out that act. Trump has also refuted it. But would you say that ICE, although the idea that it functions with may be right, the ideology, its methods are widely contested?
Well, I don't think there's any way of driving these people out except with a certain amount of strong arm. And it was something that Trump announced quite some time back. You've got problems like this all over Europe as well. And talking to them or trying to persuade them to leave, etc., doesn't work. That is why in more and more places, the local population, the indigent population, is fed up and wanting to take some, if necessary, harsh steps to get rid of these people. They have no business being there in the first place. And now that they are being caught and manhandled, they're protesting. Now, what do you want? You want it both ways.
Right. Ambassador, I beg your pardon. Mr. Mukherjee, do stay on with us as we proceed. Viewers, now former U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith has recently testified before the House Judiciary Committee about his criminal investigations into President Donald Trump. Smith, who has led investigations into Trump's actions following his 2020 election defeat, has denied any bipartisan bias. He stated that his probes found that Trump had engaged in criminal activity, quote unquote. During the hearing, Smith faced questions from the Republican-controlled committee regarding the 2 criminal cases he had filed against Trump. One was where Smith accused Trump of attempting to overrun his election laws, and other was related to the unlawful retention of classified documents. Let's listen in to how Smith responded.
I stand by my decisions as special counsel, including the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did. Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state.
The hearing has marked Smith's first public testimony that offers the American public some insight into his high-profile investigation. Now, Republican lawmakers attempted to discredit Smith's investigation, specifically questioning Smith's request for limited phone records from key Republicans, including former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and several senators. They further argued that the subpoenas were politically motivated. Meanwhile, Trump took to his social media calling for Smith to be prosecuted for his actions and accusing him of large-scale perjury. Request Mr. Mukherjee to join me back in the discussion here. Mr. Mukherjee, now the council is speaking of big charges, criminal activities against Trump, including of overturning his election losses and unlawfully retaining classified documents. Now, the hearing was done by a committee controlled by Republicans. How fair do you think these proceedings are that are taking place?
Well, it is really a leftover from the Biden era. It is no doubt that Trump was shocked with the election results and did not want to accept them. He also felt that they had been manipulated. But as the time went on, it became clear that it was not the case. However, a lot of his supporters were enraged and took to a degree of vandalism at Capitol Hill. And that, while may have been tacitly backed by Trump, there is no real evidence that he took an active role in the attack on Capitol Hill. As far as documents found at Mar-a-Lago, well, he was the president and he used to go there practically every weekend. It is a large home as well as a resort, a golf resort. It is quite likely that some of these papers may have been left behind inadvertently, I would imagine. And to find them later and say that this is, a misplacement of classified documents is again stretching the matter too far. In any case, Trump, as a sitting president, cannot be prosecuted for any of this, and this is a investigation that is going to go absolutely nowhere.
Gautam Mukherjee, thank you very much for speaking to us. And moving ahead, viewers, we're going to cover news from New Zealand, where rescuers are continuing their search for 6 missing people after a deadly landslide struck a popular campsite near Mount Maunganui. The landslide, which occurred on Thursday, buried campers, including a 15-year-old, under layers of mud. Emergency teams worked through the night, hoping for survivors, but no signs of life have been heard since the initial calls for help. At least 2 bodies have been recovered from another landslide in Tauranga. New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon emphasized his country's grief over the ongoing tragedy. Let's hear it.
New Zealand is full of grief today, and what has happened here is an absolute tragedy. I've had the immense privilege, really, to actually sit and meet with family members who have lost loved ones here, those that are waiting for their loved ones to be accounted for and are missing, they are grieving incredibly hard, and I know that New Zealand grieves with them, and I've passed that sentiment to each and every one of the family members and friends that are here waiting.
And viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates.